Welcome to Dil Ki Recipes on your favorite social media platform. Hi, I'm Dr. Shiza Mohsin, executive coach, relationship expert, and your coach in this virtual space to support you and your Desi family in America. If you identify as being a person of color, a minority, and having some form of bicultural identity, a major goal of putting this information out is to help you realize you're not alone in this journey. If you identify as a Desi with cultural roots in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and surrounding areas, trying to meet your life and relationship needs and desires while embracing some beautiful elements of your cultural heritage, Dil Ki Recipes is for you. If you don't identify as a Desi, but have a warm, loving, human being kind of disposition and you want to better yourself, I think you'll find some good stuff in here as well. So let's go on with the show. Hello, Manzar. It is so good to see you and to be able to record this podcast and this video with you.
Thank you, Shiza. I'm so excited. I know this is our first podcast together, so I'm excited. And I really would like us to have a conversation about topics that are of interest to everyone.
This is going to be awesome, Manzar. And the idea behind Dil Ki Recipes was that, we in the South Asian diaspora are hungry for relatability in so many ways because a lot of the people who live in the West are relying on their parents or their larger communities or relatives to give them that frame of reference. And sometimes we end up ignoring how we have evolved over here with that bicultural identity, with that third culture, if you may, and we're all over the spectrum. So I love the idea that I've started where I'm inviting voices and talent and amazing people like yourself to have this conversation. So many people who are from this part of the world, who have heritage and South Asian descent, have relatability. They don't feel alone, especially when it comes to the challenges of relationships, challenges of mental health. So I'm so grateful you're here and I want to introduce you to our audience. Manzar, you have been a psychologist. And again, I'm not trying to date you, but you have to know you're like a very unique phenomena because you have been in this field for about 40 years. And this is such a new space even now. And the stigma is there. You are a licensed psychologist, you're a clinical social worker, you have been coaching, you have worked with diverse populations within the US, including refugee populations. You've designed programs for them. In the healthcare field, you have done a lot of amazing work. And so I guess my first question to you is, how do you feel given that you are in or started in a field that was not probably the favorite thing for your family to hear that you wanted to get into?
That's right. Boy, that was probably in a nutshell what my life has been. So I didn't even realize I've done all those things. So thank you for reminding me. First of all, I wanted to thank you. I mean, you have developed a platform that was really needed. So I'm excited for you and the work that you have done so far and are planning on doing. And I'm excited to be part of it. We are here to actually be able to discuss issues that don't normally get discussed, right, in our South Asian heritage. And the fact that we, for so long, have not been open to really sharing what we need and things like, I mean, myself included, right? Not be able to share what our needs are, how we are feeling. We are basically islands among ourselves. And I think it's important that we part the curtains and we really look behind.
Yes. I love
Yeah,
it. I love it. Which is
right.
why I am so excited about our topic today because this is a topic that probably needs to be talked about way more than we do. And that's talking about our South Asian men. Given that this whole formula for what a good man, an amazing man, honorable man, all of those definitions are changing. The male role universally is changing as the world is changing. But they see men, do not get, and I want to just caveat this because I also know that there's a lot of conversations that happen about how there are men who may not be as respectful of their privilege or who have not shown up in the best way. But then I feel that we are underrepresenting the good ones, the ones that are struggling, the ones that do try their best to responsibly show up. And with they see men and emotions, whole nother
That's right.
challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what brought me to the field in the first place. I think we get into this because we want to understand ourselves first. And then we realize that, okay, there's a lot out there that we can help other people. And speaking as a South Asian man, I mean, I can tell you so many topics are forbidden or things that we sort of don't want to address because of the cultural way that we have been brought up. And depending also on our generation, right? And what kinds of information is available to us. We may have preconceived notions. What is the concept of a real man, right?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And
All
that
these
varies from culture to culture.
Absolutely. And in our culture, Manzar, we've grown up around these man definitions.
Mhm.
Something I'll put out there for the many men who may be able to connect with it is that I've come across dear friends, I've come across colleagues, I've come across clients who maybe lost a parent, a father specifically,
Mhm.
when they were young, and they were declared the man of the house when they were 5, 10, 13. Like, so you are putting this burden that culturally, providing burden that is put on a man. So culturally calling a teenager, preteen, the man of the house, like how
Right.
devastating that this kid has to think that they're now responsible. So you're kind of stealing a childhood from, and the
That's
mental health challenges that come with that.
That's right. And not having enough role models. The example that you're providing, like being a preteen, for example, and not having a male role model who's an adult, you don't learn how to be a quote unquote real man and what does it mean within the cultural context. So, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of challenges. And by the way, I have some notes and some questions over here so that I don't forget
I
something.
know,
If I look
I
away,
know.
you know what's going on.
I know you're prepared, and I'm happy to be in the hot seat, but I have some questions for you as well because I really think that this perspective sharing will hopefully be healing for a lot of our listeners, especially men. And so my first question, because you've been doing this way longer than I have, tell me what your perspective is on the hesitation that South Asian men show in trying therapy.
Oh boy. Do you have a few hours? So it's been a journey for me to see men, especially South Asian men, in therapy and coaching, whatever modality that I'm using. But in the most part, what I see is that people think that they need to be able to handle everything on their own. That's one of the themes that I have seen. So if somebody comes to me, like if somebody contacts me and that's a South Asian man, and the fact that they are asking for help, they already have gone through a lot in order to get to that point. Because
Yeah.
chances are they don't think that they should be asking for help. So that's like the beginning, right? So I want to meet them where they're at and say, hey, you know what? It must have taken a lot for you to contact me. So let's see together you need and what are some of the things that are going on in your life that you want assistance with. So the words like psychotherapy and all of those things are not necessarily needed because that kind of puts people off. I think the best thing to do is, hey, we're in this together. Let's figure out how we can assist you and have a partnership. So it's anything is about a partnership.
I love that. And on this note, I want to inject, because I'm hoping that the men who are listening will also walk away with a couple of tools, mini tools that might help them seek help. Because, when they are trying to say out loud that they need therapy, it almost, to your point, feels like failure. And they need help. And needing help, oh my God, the stigma for needing any kind of help. Like men struggle with getting help for directions, let alone
I
let
think you
alone.
know us.
Yeah,
But now we have
unfortunately.
GPS, so we're all
Yeah,
good.
I've sat in a car with, many people of your gender who are like, all kinds of family members and friends. And it's like, we could just ask, but that doesn't happen. And so, what I would invite men who are listening to think of is that I need to grow in this area. I need more information and tools to resolve this instead of thinking I am not good enough. I do not, I'm a failure.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think one of the biggest things is that people, men in particular in South Asian culture, our culture, they feel incompetent then. Like, okay, I need to be an expert. I need to be able to take care of my family. And the way the family structure is generally set up is that men are in charge and we need to be in charge of our own feelings and our own strength in order to make sure that the family is intact and things like that. Now, if you're feeling like there are things that you need help with, that is the biggest barrier. So the way I have approached it is to thank them for finally reaching out and say, look, when you have a bone that's broken, you'll go to a doctor and you get help, right?
Love
This is
it.
the same thing. There are different things, different professionals for different type of issues that are coming up. So I normalize it. I think it's very important to do that because it's not like there's something deficient in you that you are seeking help at this time. And sometimes what happens is that somebody goes and sees their doctor, their primary care physician, and they're given an assessment, say for depression, because some of the symptoms that they're presenting with. And then the doctor might make a recommendation, hey, you need to go see a mental health provider or somebody that can help you based on that. So a number of times I've had people contact me after they've seen their primary care physician. So that's one source of like
Which is
referral
which
into
is so
something like this.
wonderful.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. Because now the doctors are realizing that we are a holistic person. We don't just live in a medical arena, we don't live in the mental health or coaching or whatever. We are a whole person, that everything we do relates to everything else. So that's where I'm seeing a lot more of the South Asian men coming to me or asking for assistance, whether it's coaching through some difficult things that might be going on, or some people who may actually be very depressed and maybe they're being prescribed medications, antidepressants, something like that. And there's a stigma related to that too, right? Oh, should I be
Absolutely.
taking that? Does it mean that I'm crazy? What are other people in the family going to think about? What if
Absolutely.
relatives find out that I'm on
Yes.
antidepressants?
Definitely, there's that stigma. You're so right. Let's dive into, some of the challenges that men face when they go to therapy. And the first one that I want to talk about is, the young 20, 30, 20s and 30s man who is living in the West, has been raised with a lot of values around respect. And now that they are becoming their own individual person, the struggle between not liking how the parents are trying to control them versus how to set boundaries to make sure that they're also being true to themselves. So I would love to talk about this challenge of, if you are not compliant with your parents, then you are a bad son, or if you're not taking care of them, which also means that you're a young professional financially trying to help your parents or listen to them in so many ways. How do you see that challenge for these young men?
I've seen a number of people in our practice who are in that age range. And some of the issues have to do with growing up in the West and with parents who have obviously instilled certain values. So they are basically bicultural, because the dominant culture, of course, is all around us. And then growing up in a South Asian family, you have certain values and certain things that you learn. And by the way, a lot of those values, they help people, right? And have the system and have the integrity and the values that you would want in a person that you would admire. So I would say that it's an opportunity for the young people. Then I look at it as an opportunity. So if somebody comes to me and they're struggling and they think that their parents have certain expectations of them that they feel that they are not ready or able to fulfill, we talk about these things. Even if somebody comes in distress, like a young person in their 20s, there are things that are functioning for them within their family system. So we want to be real cognizant of that, and we want to make sure that they can look at the whole landscape. So that would be the first thing as part of the assessment of the situation and why they're there. If lines of communication are not already developed within the family structure, we work on how we can develop those. Because there are a lot of unset expectations that parents have, especially maybe the children have too, of each other that never are verbalized, but they come out anyway. So let's have it out in the open. It's an opportunity.
I love
So
it. And, so this would be such a beautiful thing for a young man to process in therapy, because we hear this whole thing about men and anger. And I feel that our culture perpetuates some of it, because the respect thing means you don't speak. But then that pressure cooker is building, right? You're not
yes,
speaking, you're disagreeing. But out of respect, you don't say anything. You don't say anything, anything, anything. And if you continue that, the pressure is building, 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 and then there's a blow up. So it's
that's
either nothing, no communication, or anger. And when you go to therapy, you figure out a way to articulate that to your family in a respectful, culturally competent way that is not
Exactly.
disrespecting culture, because a lot of times immigrant parents dismiss or minimize the reality that your children are not just going to imbibe the educational portion of living here because that's what they
That's
want, the good education, the good career. Well, it's like a package. It comes
yeah,
with
it is a
all this
package.
other stuff that they're also absorbing. And then, like I tell parents that, in middle school and high school, it's not academic issues that are difficult. It's social issues, it's emotional issues, because it's not about AP classes and honors classes only. It's about who am I going to have lunch with? Who am I going to be at recess? There, that sense of
Right.
belonging needs to happen. And then whoever they're belonging with could be culturally different.
That's
So
right.
what a difficult thing to navigate.
Yeah, it is. And then by the time I see them, they're probably in their 20s or older. And so a lot of these things are very sort of ingrained and patterns of communication among the parents and the kids and the culture at large that they sort of interact in. So one of the things that I do is to look at what would effective communication look like between you as an adult child and your parents, because that's the source of your distress right now. So let's come kind of talk about that, maybe even role play it if they're having a hard time sort of conceptualizing it. But I also know it from a South Asian perspective, right? It's more like, how do you bring it up? How do you stay respectful to your parents, but at the
Mm,
same time be able to have your needs and your opinions be heard? So it's about a balancing act. And how do you reach that? I mean, that's part of the discussion, and that's part of
absolutely. Because,
going out and trying it out.
absolutely. Because, you want to think that there is that regard for the culture. Unfortunately, sometimes it's overemphasized. And then you see this depression, you see a lot of terrible things. And, even in terms of the capacity to be able to tolerate it, we end up having a lot more kids attempt self harm because of that bottled up feeling. So, this is something serious also that needs to be considered. And men in our culture don't have general permission to emote, I feel. That
That's right.
they're supposed to be the mark. And so, men don't cry, men don't have emotions.
And be strong for the whole family, not just for themselves.
Absolutely.
Right. And so when I see college age South Asian men, for example, this is the first time they've lived away from home, right? So they were in a very tight knit family, and now they've gone away to college, or they're doing something on their own for the first time. And there's so many different things that impact them. And so, in order to understand the whole picture, we have to understand the family within which they grew up and what are some of the ways they have internalized what they should be like as men. Like, okay, now I am away from home and I'm supposed to, first of all, go to a good school, do well in school, get a good job, probably get married right after that. And so there's just all this stuff that, and to your point earlier about pressure cooker, and then at the same time understanding that their needs might be different than their parent, right? And so that's a typical sort of scenario that I see with young people, 20 somethings typically.
I'll just segue into the next phase of life, this whole
Hmm.
finding a partner that, is a personal fit versus a family fit. A lot of times, young men in their 20s, 30s, even 40s are looking at who is very compatible with them. But then when they think of the collective culture that we are, how is this person going to fit in my family? And understanding that. And needless to say, there are elements, because we live in a bicultural society, of there being like a difference in whether it's a caste or a class, socioeconomics, faith. All of those things make that decision so difficult for these men who are trying to separate parents' preferences from their own values. That's a very tough thing, especially for men in their 20s and 30s now, that they're looking at this relational marriage thing.
Yeah. And I think what happens sometimes, and I've seen this too, is that they may be interested in somebody, they may not tell their parents, and has this secrecy around it. So secrecy is what makes things even harder. And so how do we have that level of conversation with parents? Some of them may not be open to having that. So it's finessing all of that. And support around that is so crucial at this point because of the way that the parents may not have been open to a level of conversation that gets them to a win-win situation.
Absolutely. And also because in the process, there may be some very poor decisions, with the divorce
That's
rate
right.
going high, when these relationships are happening in secrecy, you're so busy protecting that relationship because you're not allowed to have it that you fail to notice what's not working.
That's
And when you
right.
are open about it, then you actually get to see, oh, this might not work for me. And that loose way before there is an opportunity for a failed
Yeah,
marriage. So you're basically closing that. And a
that's right.
lot of adults do that secrecy thing because one, dating or meeting someone. In the Muslim culture, there's this new term called halal dating. All of those things, you're walking that line of disrespect and secrecy. So, like so many people say that, asking for forgiveness is so much easier than asking for permission.
That's
So
right.
I will just not tell. And so this perpetuates into something that's uncontrollable, and women will still talk to each other. Men don't talk to their friends about these
Mhm.
personal challenges. There are very few men that even have friends they can talk to. Most men do not have access to people they can safely process this kind of stuff with.
That's right. Let's face it, not only South Asian culture, but American culture, men go and do activities together. They don't talk about their feelings and what's getting in the way or what their desires are and things like that. Typically, women do. Women have their friends that they can relate to and talk about things that are important to them. So that's the other piece that I think as men, we miss out on. And frankly, culture, just like anything, is going through changes, right? Culture doesn't stay static. And so when we have these conversations that you and I are having, hopefully that ignites something in people who are listening and watching to actually start having those conversations with their close, friends or family members if they feel comfortable as men to start having those, because it's not a sign of weakness to talk about what your needs are or how you're feeling or whether or not you're having a bad day or a bad life for that matter, but really being able to find one or two people that you can actually have those conversations with. That's the other thing I say to my clients. It's like, who in your life you feel safe around, emotionally safe? And they're like, well, what does that mean? It's like, well, you have to really try to look at your milieu and your people that you surround yourself with and decide who you can open up to. Because it's not always safe. That's the other thing.
Absolutely. And I will
Rumors
just
fly.
Oh my goodness. It's so
Yeah,
sad because of our community, because of the collective nature, the gossip is just, uncontrollable sometimes
that's right.
in the South Asian community. And it's very damaging, especially when somebody's going through something tough. Here, I will put in a little, I'll call it a recommendation for men because I see this in my practice a lot. I have a somewhat unique practice because being a female practitioner, and you know this, probably similar in your practice, that women are consumers of therapy more than men.
More so.
In my practice in the last 6 years, the first 5 or 6 years, it was a little bit lopsided with more women. But in the last 6 to 7 years, it's at least 50% men. And because, and it's like a tight network where the men send more referrals for men. So I do have a large male population. And one of the things that I find myself saying to men in all stages, young, when they are in tough marriages that they need to exit, that you have to build community. Men are not
Hmm.
naturally, and maybe because of societal, and I'd love to get your perspective at building community. They so hyper focus on finding a partner, and then the partner becomes the route to the social life. So when heaven forbid that relationship doesn't work, they are not just losing a partner, they're losing the whole community. Whereas the woman has her community, she may lose a partner. And research for mature, I was reading something that there's a research recently published that talked about couples who are in their 60s and 70s, where there was a cohort and they asked the husbands who their best friends were. And more than 66 or so percent of men said their best friends were their wives. And
Right. I believe it.
in the same group, the women, it was not even 30 or so percent of the same group
Hmm.
that said that their husbands were their best friends. So, they had community, they had the friends imagining. I haven't read the details, but the thought that came up for me was this is such a vulnerability. So it's important for men to not isolate, to not glorify just that romantic relationship, but
That's right.
have a variety of different relationships. And yes, absolutely, if you have a partner who's social, and then you get all of that, but you're limiting yourself if you just
Mhm.
have that one person.
Yeah, and in our, mental health world or coaching world, we call it support system, right? That what is your support system like? Tell me a little bit about your life where you go for assistance or where you are available for
I
assistance.
love
It's
it.
a two-way street. Everything that we say or do in our lives is a two-way street. So as men, if we are not open to listening to what's going on in somebody else's life, why would somebody else do that? Why would we be able to count on somebody else? And frankly, a lot of times when husbands lose their wives, for example, there are so many men that quickly go and get married
Mm.
again. To your point, is that, well, wives are the only way for them to be able to be connected to the real world. So let's quickly get married. And
So
that may be a
true.
solution for some, but for a lot of people, we have to really look long and hard about what the need is, what the desperation or the urgency is.
I think
That
you
happens a lot. I've seen that as well.
I think you've nailed a very, very critical thing. And I see this for so many friends, acquaintances, and male clients who, thank goodness, the clients who work with me and I'm sure go for therapy will end up slowing down because you have to work on yourself and you have to learn from that relationship and heal before you
That's
jump into the next one. Well, but so many men jump into the next one and then that also ends up being unsuccessful. So then you're
that's
on
right.
round three of the relationship. And a lot of times I see them settle in the third one. The second one also becomes because you haven't worked on yourself and you jumped into something. So
That's right.
this is such an important thing that you mentioned. And I'm gonna, because you were talking about support systems, so I want to segue into this whole idea of the gender roles in a marriage for men as the role for men is changing, as women are more and more women are educated and in the workforce and not
That's
just
right.
looking for financial or economic support and wanting a different kind of partner. Talk to me about what you notice in our culture as these culturally, gender informed roles that are becoming
Mhm.
difficult because they serve men more and now the women are resisting participating.
What an important question. So, first of all, I want to go back to the point that you were talking about. Like, you see more men in your practice now than you did maybe probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. I'm seeing the same thing. So, people are accessing, assistance more so, and who happen to be men. Now, the other part of it is that when women started working outside of the home, you will see a differential, right? You'll see a difference. Women are getting as educated, sometimes even more, than men are, whether it's South Asian culture or whether it's the dominant culture that we live in. They all are. So of course, they are going to want to have more say in what happens in their lives and to them. So I think the whole notion that we have growing up South Asian, where the father is in charge of everything and all the decisions are made, I think we need to take a good and hard look at what are some ways that we can still be real men, but at the same time, have the women and others in our lives share that responsibility. So, it's a delicate balance. And I keep talking about balance because that's what it is. And to be open to that. Now the reality is that some men are open to that change, but others are not. So the key is, how do we work with men who may be closed into a way of approaching life and living life and thinking their relationship and family needs to be. And I'm telling you, well, as you know, you work with a lot of men and families, that is a challenge. And I think it only can be overcome by us really looking at what we are dealing with, making it very sort of open about, okay, this is what's going on. This is my assessment of it based on what you have told me. What are some of the ways we can communicate with each other better? We need to listen to each person's needs within the family, structure, and understand that everybody is as important as everybody else. I know it's a hard message for us men to hear typically, but we need to hear it. We need to really hear the people in our lives, especially wives, who are trying their best to make sure that things function as best as possible. So that's sort of my little sort of monologue on it, but that's how I
And
personally
and
feel.
I will tell you that men and women hearing you, this will resonate with them. And that's why we need voices like yours, Manzar, because, like we were talking about this whole thing about real men. And I was talking to a group and sharing with them that real men are the men who help their wives at home. Real men are the ones that help with the kids because they're their kids too. She didn't bring them from,
Exactly.
real men have compassion. Real men also give space to their partners to not feel like they are the responsible for the chore, because there's this thing I in Desi couples I see a lot. It's hilarious that the husband will be like, oh look, that needs to be fixed. They are the observers,
That's
and
right.
now the wives who are also working outside of the home, and even if they aren't, working inside the home is very tough and unrewarding because nobody is telling you great job for maintaining your
That's
home, for the dishes to be in the dishwasher every day, for having a meal, for every kid being safe. So they don't get those rewards, but the husband comes and notes something. Oh, that needs to be fixed. And that's their contribution. So the wives who are working outside of the home are now finding themselves saying, well, then fix it if you are seeing it. So that
Or if
change.
both parties are working outside of the home, then hire somebody to fix it, but take
Yeah,
some responsibility. Yeah, I mean, those are day-to-day challenges, right? That really we need to have a shift in how we approach this. But I think in a nutshell, it's all about what are we going to do about it rather than what you are going to do about it. And so
absolutely. Love it.
if we are a couple, then we need to be on the same side of the table, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that leads me to the last part of our conversation where I want to definitely at least start touching on these difficult topics. And, what we notice are the negative coping mechanisms that men indulge in sometimes, from addictions to compulsive coping to what is called the second adolescence. So I just want to open up this space and ask you what you've observed. A lot of men, part of the reason that they end up doing that is, they're, in my view, they're medicating or they're treating something, but the coping mechanism that they choose might be very
Unhealthy for them and their
unhealthy
family.
for them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen that in my practice as well. And what happens a lot of times is that it may start out as distraction, right? If you are having a very stressful day, or if you're busy with something and you have too much responsibility, there are times when you just need to escape from it. Now, is this a healthier escape, or is it something that eventually will take over your life? And unfortunately, in some cases, that's what happens. Like it could be gambling, it could be porn, watching hours and hours of it, or going and gambling away all your family's savings. I mean, I've seen that too, by the way, which is unfortunate, which is very sad. So the way that I have approached it is that, first of all, really talk it through and really understand that the person knows that this is actually a problem. Maybe they may come in for other reasons, but this is what is causing a lot of the problem. So it comes out as we are having sessions and things like that. And then we work on, what is this serving you? How is that serving you? How is it getting in the way? And what we call like motivational interviewing, right? It's a one way to kind of address that. Bottom line is understanding that this is a problem, and also understanding that we can do something about it. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that's what these men are looking for. Is, oh my God, now this is something that's out of control, and I'm supposed to be in control, and this is just
Abs-
not helping me. That's what I
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is such an important one because we see alcohol, we see drugs, we see gaming, we see porn addiction in men, and as a coping mechanism, the millennials and Gen Z that's getting into married relationships. A lot of times couples will tell me, well, he wants to unwind, and his way of unwinding is just go play a video game or, be on his
Mhm.
console, Xbox or PlayStation, because that's how, because, remember, this was something they'd been doing to disconnect since they were teenagers.
That's right.
So now this becomes, and then, then it gets replaced by sometimes by other things that are more damaging. So there is and I love that you are kind of describing the process so men who are listening will know what to expect. Because a lot of times it's so interesting to me that the casual questions that I get from people who've never experienced therapy is what happens in therapy? What do you do? How do you talk about stuff? So
That's
when you're giving an example, Manzar, of how you take somebody, which is very similar to how most of us do it, it's giving them a blueprint on, okay, well, this is how it's going to be. I won't be judged. These are the questions I will be asked or will be discussing with my therapist. So hopefully it's going to make it a little bit easier for them to access the space, because a lot of people from our community don't even know what it means to be in counseling or therapy or experience a coaching session.
That's right. And also, especially if they feel like, that they have a gambling problem, for example, and they even hide it from their own friends, let alone their family members. Friends are some people that we usually are able to be more honest with, and they even hide it from them. So I think a good assessment is the starting point to understand the extent of the problem. But the other thing is, there are also programs available that people can become part of that are around gambling or porn addiction and things like that, as you know. And so people can be part of that. The key is to go to programs where they feel like they belong, because dropout rates in programs like that can be really high if people don't feel like they're connected. So I think it needs to be a culturally competent program that people get involved with.
And that's where our community struggles, right? There's so much shame. So going into a group where you're actually admitting that you've done something that is not something to be proud of becomes another barrier.
Yeah.
So, to everybody listening, like, do whatever it is, but talk to someone, because, and I would say that to family members, do
Mhm.
not character attack this person, to not shame them, because our culture is amazing at shaming language. It's unbelievable. We rule the
Absolutely.
world through guilt and shame. It's like, it's such a thing. And so that really doesn't. And then also, partners of people who are in these situations then become the police, which is not the role, which is not what you want to do.
No,
And and the men are isolating and in this
yeah.
place of shame that.
Yeah, and personal accountability, right? It's about personal accountability. If you're going to be part of a program or getting help for yourself, it shouldn't be your partner's responsibility to police what you're doing or what you're not doing, because that's part of recovery, is to take personal accountability for your behavior and what you're indulging in, things like that. So, I mean, this session today, to me, seems like it's beyond shame, right? What is beyond shame? What is beyond your upbringing, beyond what you thought was possible? And we need to be able to look beyond that for ourselves and our families and get the help that we need in order to move forward. I think the biggest goal is for everybody who's listening is to understand that this is not just one person's problem, then it's all of ours within the family milieu, and that we can do something about it. If this kind of behavior, like gambling, for instance, we're talking about, has become an issue, because it impacts everybody. You may think that it doesn't impact everybody in the family, but it does.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about this other coping mechanism that is becoming very popular in the South Asian community, especially as they gain privilege, financial privilege,
Oh
is
yeah,
a lot of risky behavior, what are called boys trips, and what
yeah,
are called,
I
very
do know that.
risque borderline infidelity encounters. And I'm wondering what your perspective is, and feel free to ask me questions because this is my specialty. The what's underneath this, I finally have money, so I'm owed the fun phase, even though I didn't get it
Personally,
when I
I
was
mean,
a
I haven't
teenager.
seen too many people with those issues yet, so I'll lean on you. But I'll tell you one thing though. As South Asian descent men, as boys growing up, there's a lot of structure and a lot of expectations, a lot of things around you. But once you get to an age where you are earning enough money, you have you don't have to answer to somebody else, maybe your spouse, I don't know, maybe not. You then go and do the things that you were never able to do because all the controls are from the outside in. Now, when you have only learned that, if you become in your 30s and 40s and you have enough means, the outside controls are gone. So I think it's about what is within you that
Mhm.
will tell you what is healthy for you, what is not. And that's what I'm thinking that it might be going on in that space. I don't know. What do you think?
No, absolutely. And I notice a lot of that. And it shows up for different reasons. This idea of wanting to be cool. We're living vicariously the dreams a lot of times that we had dreamt in our teenage and in our youth.
Oh, yeah.
When you're a geek, I'm making this up, or if you were not the popular kid and you saw all of these cool people doing cool things that you weren't able to, and now that you're like 40 or 50 or 60, and now you have the money so you can get a sports car and you can go on a boys' trip where you do participate in risky behavior, it's like they're living out some fantasy that they may have had, but it has a lot of consequences on their marriages, on the relationship if it is not. And know that I am big into people taking breaks for self-care, and
Oh,
in
absolutely.
marriage
I
especially.
am too.
Yeah, because both of them need it. The boys' trip is also needed, the girls' trip, but the parameters of what you do in those trips, how you participate, how responsible you are towards your relationship, like the whole what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas kind of concept is not
Mhm.
unknown to our community either. And
That's
so
right.
what ends up happening and landing in my office are these risky behaviors exercised that are now compromising the marriage. And then it's the consequence of behaving that way, which
Right.
which which really puts a lot of strain on the marriage. And
Yeah. So
and
how would you approach it? How do you approach it? I know you get a lot of clients with that
yes,
profile.
a lot. And it's unfortunate also, but like I love the fact that they're at least coming for help. So, the most important thing is to not shame them for participating in something, right? It's
Yeah,
important to understand what is going on,
that's right.
what is going on in the relationship, what the dynamic is, because that's where also there is privacy and secrecy. And I
Yeah,
see it all the time where, so couples who do this, and men and women, so they have like all these different kinds of relationships. And so what ends up happening is really interesting is that, for example, four boys went. Now, one of the boys is very close to his wife, and everything is transparent, and they have
hmm,
a very healthy dynamic of, okay, you need a break, go with the boys, is telling their wife everything that's happening.
that's
Whereas
right.
the friend does not have a good relationship, is being completely secretive, has, a wife that has more, issues with some of the issues, and so they feel their wife is controlling, so there's the secrecy. But,
Yeah,
you know, the grapevine ends up exposing a lot of things with or without, and
right.
and
That can be
and then when the
challenging.
secret is open, the conflict shows up. So of course, de-escalation is a big thing. And then also really evaluating if this is a one-time error versus
Hmm.
habitual things. So all of those things are processed then, because a lot of times in the relationship, it's surfacing a need to recalibrate elements of the relationship that may or may not be working. So it's a great opportunity for couples to really look deep into their own selves and then
Yeah,
their relational selves. So to see how we can redirect and rewire this relationship for health. And what I'm loving is that people are open to that now, and they see
I
couples
know.
are open
I
to
have
it.
seen that too.
It's so
I have seen that too.
exciting. It's
Like
so
20
exciting.
years ago, I'll tell you this 20 years ago, I did not have a single South Asian client. Let that sink in. Now, the landscape is so different. I mean, when I say I saw diverse populations, I did, but they were not South Asian. Now I see Indians and Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, like on a regular basis. They are
Absolutely.
seeking. So you know what? The stigma might be actually lifting a little bit,
Yes. And I am
right? I
so
mean, we can hope.
excited.
We can hope. And I think,
Absolutely.
yeah. And I think the fact that internet it has been such a big part of our life and all these YouTubes and everything else that's going on that people are utilizing in order to get the information, we're living in one big world. And it's what we choose to focus on is now the issue. Like, what are we going to do in order to make our lives better for ourselves and our families? And that's why I'm so excited to have this conversation today because we don't, when we were growing up, or when at least I was growing up, this was not something that you talked. This is not something that you even saw in my early practice with South Asians. I saw it with my Western clients, but I
Absolutely.
did not see it with South Asians.
And our issues, our relational issues, a lot of times overlap as well. So it's not like, a lot of these things don't affect, because I see clients on both sides of Western and South Asian, and I see so much commonality, because at the end of the day, we are looking to connect. At the end of the day, men are also looking to change, but sometimes they don't even have the guidebook on how they need to do this. I'm going to pull you back in next time, because the topics we had come up with, we want to talk about toxic masculinity. We're going to talk about how sometimes women perpetuate this negative
Oh,
narrative
yeah.
of the gender role of the man. And also, what is this new definition of a real, wonderful man? So we'll continue doing that. So it was so lovely conversing with you.
Pleasure is all mine. Oh my God. I'm so glad you started this, and I'm glad to be part of it.
Thank you, and looking forward to more conversations. Please remember to keep listening and watching as part of your weekly self-care and learning ritual. There are lots of commonalities in our lives, relationships, in our joys and struggles. And my hope is that this material will help you expand your perspective, give you some clarity on how to think about things, and ultimately make you feel better and sorted about your life and relationships. Hope you have a fulfilling and wholesome day.